This is CBN News Watch.
Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Efrem Graham. I want to begin this half hour in the Middle East. The prospect of a negotiated deal to free the remaining Israeli hostages kidnapped by Hamas sank to a new low over the weekend. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar has made new demands in this months-long standoff with the lives of the hostages on the line.
A lone terrorist murdered 3 Israeli guards Sunday at the Allenby crossing between Jordan and the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned what he called the despicable shooting and pointed the blame at Iran.
We're surrounded by a murderous ideology led by Iran's axis of evil. The murderers do not differentiate between us.
In Jordan, thousands celebrated the terrorist attack, the terrorists, and threatened Israel.
We say to Netanyahu that your entity is vanishing and that there is no solution for you except to return to the countries from which you came. There is no place for you in Palestine.
Amid Israel's fight against terrorism, the push for a ceasefire and hostage deal has hit another roadblock. The Washington Post and Israel's Channel 12 reporting Hamas has introduced another obstacle to prevent a deal. A new demand where Israel would release 100 more terrorists serving life sentences than had been agreed to. Israeli sources putting the chances of a deal at close to zero. But protesters are still demanding a Gaza war ceasefire and return of the hostages in Israel. The protests come as the German newspaper Bild published the contents of a secret Hamas document that implies the protesters may have played into Hamas's strategy. The paper claims the document shows Hamas leader Sinwar's plans to deceive, manipulate international opinion, and psychologically torture hostages' relatives. It said psychological pressure on the families of the prisoners must continue to be applied, both now and during the first phase, so that public pressure on the enemy government will increase. The document also exposed how Hamas manipulated the Israeli and international media. In case of a breakdown in talks, Hamas instructed its people to say Israel rejected the compromise proposals formulated by the U.S. regardless of the facts, so Hamas will not be seen as responsible for the failure to reach an agreement. The manipulation had one goal: rebuilding Hamas's military and maintaining control over the Gaza Strip. The IDF says it has had the document in its hands for months and is from a mid-level Hamas leader. During Sunday's cabinet meeting, Netanyahu addressed the revelation.
The vast majority of Israeli citizens do not fall into this trap of Hamas. They know that we're committed with all our might to achieving the goals of the war.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Nearly a year into Israel's war against Hamas, the conflict grows more intense with Hezbollah in the north. As missile attacks increase, hospitals are crucial and could become targets. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl goes underground for a look at a unique solution to keep them safe and operational.
Sheba Medical Center has been a key part of the war effort since the Hamas invasion.
And we've treated well over 1,600 soldiers and civilians, mostly soldiers. And I can say that the challenge is there on a day-to-day basis still because there's still, unfortunately, a war going on in Gaza.
Global Media Director Steve Waltz says, in addition to the casualties of war, hospital personnel have been unusually busy this summer treating sick Israelis.
So the hospital's been challenged, the staff has been challenged. People try and escape for a few days. The staff tries to escape for a few days just to reboot and come back to ourselves because not only is the war not over, we don't know what's going to be going forward.
Here at the Sheba Medical Center, 6 floors underground, they have a complete hospital ready just in case there's a massive missile attack.
This was an area that was originally built and created during the Corona era because we really didn't know how many sick patients we would get, but we kept it because we know that we live in an area where missiles are falling all the time. So we knew that one day this would come into use.
This is especially important given the threats from multiple fronts, including Iran, against heavily populated areas like Tel Aviv.
Each area here is designated for a different section of the hospital, and we would be able to move them down here quickly, and they can stay down here for as long as needed, and the doctors would be here to tend to patients. The electricity is such that we can hook up dialysis patients, and we have hundreds of beds ready and capable of being used for patients if in an emergency.
Above ground, the hospital covers 200 acres with 2,000 beds. Various underground sections can house hundreds of potential patients, and if that's not enough,
we have something catastrophic. This hospital has two alternatives. It can move more people under the maternity hospital, and in an extreme emergency, and we drill this once a year or once every other year, we can actually build a field hospital outside. In other words, if God forbid one of the buildings here was damaged and they could not return to the main hospital or one of the other hospitals, we have 5 hospitals on campus, we can actually have the capability of building a field hospital in one of the major parking lots and operate that.
In addition to the operation here, Rambam Medical Center in Haifa and others in Israel also have underground facilities. Given this literal groundbreaking idea, other countries have come to Israel for help.
Israel is unique because we get missiles all the time. Actually, Sheba Medical Center has been asked by other hospitals around the world, especially those that are, let's say, in Germany, that are unfortunately close to the area where the Ukraine war is going on with Russia.
One area housing a large number of Russian ballistic missiles is just 10 minutes flying time from downtown Berlin.
None of them are prepared for an emergency, how to move patients, how to build areas that are more secure. So they've come here, and we've gone to them to offer advice as to how to quickly prepare in the case of an emergency if missiles start falling on them.
The U.S. is also aware of Sheba's unique approach.
We're prepared for any eventuality, and I can say that the U.S. military has come here and visited this exact location to see how we would handle this, because we do have a very special relationship. Israel has a special relationship with CENTCOM and the Fifth Fleet. Unfortunately, this is a hospital that's prepared 365 days a year, 24/7.
Waltz tells CBN News Jews and Arabs here work together nonstop for the common cause of saving lives. He sees their resilience as a great example of Israel's ability to keep going in the face of all its threats. And Sheba's message to the world?
Our slogan is that we offer hope without boundaries, and that is what we live on here. That is the DNA of our hospital, is that we offer hope without boundaries, and we do that 365 days a year.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Sheba Medical Center, Ramat Gan, Israel.
Here at home, dozens of wildfires in California and Nevada have forced the evacuation of thousands of residents. Scorching temperatures are making the fight against fires even more difficult. Dale Hurd is on this story.
State officials said overnight there were 14 active wildfires burning across California. Blazes have grown by more than 4 times just since Saturday morning.
And so it was really just everywhere you turned around, there was a new spot fire. There were literally hundreds of spot fires coming off of this.
Fire north of the Bay Area has burned at least 30 buildings and forced 4,000 people to evacuate the city of Clear Lake. Authorities urged residents in several areas to flee.
This is the first time I've ever evacuated. So it's been all new experience for me.
In Southern California, firefighters briefly ran from flames. The area's largest wildfire, the Line Fire, has burned more than 20,000 acres in San Bernardino County and has grown 14 times bigger in just over 1 day. An emergency was also declared in Nevada as a fire south of Reno forced 14,000 people to evacuate. And a brutal days-long heat wave has gripped the West, with triple-digit heat expected in some areas through tomorrow. The heat, along with thunderstorms, making things even tougher for firefighters. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, the voters who just might swing this election. Evangelicals could determine who gets a seat in the Oval Office. See how these voters just might swing the election. Stay with us. You're watching CBN News Watch. Welcome back to CBN News Watch. In 2016, evangelical voters were united behind former President Donald Trump and helped him to win the White House. This election season, his views on abortion are dividing many of those same supporters. CBN's chief political analyst David Brody is on this story.
But we got to do that, fellas, you know?
In a presidential election seen as razor close, Donald Trump will once again need conservative evangelicals fully behind him if he hopes to be reelected in November. There's a difference this time around, however. Tony Perkins is with the Family Research Council and keeps a finger on the pulse of the evangelical grassroots.
The temperature is not as high as it was in 2016 and 2020 when it comes to who they're supporting.
The main reason comes down to abortion. In the past, Trump courted evangelicals, promising staunchly pro-life policies, and he delivered. Since the decision overturning Roe v. Wade, however, the abortion issue has led to political defeats for Republicans. That's led to Trump's refusal to endorse a federal abortion ban and his willingness to support abortion pill access through the mail. He also declared that he would be, quote, great for women and their reproductive rights, toxic language Democrats use to push abortion. Sean Spicer is Trump's former press secretary.
Look, for an election that comes down to thousands of votes in handfuls of states, I think this is bad. This is it. It doesn't keep a key part of the Republican/conservative base excited. This was key to his victory last time with the judges, and he's undermining it. These are unforced errors right now, as far as I'm concerned.
So has there been a shift? In an interview with CBN News, Trump campaign spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt pushes back on that assumption.
I would reject that there's been a shift, David. I think President Trump has been consistent and clear, even in his first term as president, that the issue of abortion is one he believes and one the pro-life community has fought to bring back to the states.
The Trump campaign is fully aware it needs evangelicals to show up bigly to win. That's why it quickly cleaned up another potential mess when the former president appeared to favor voting for a Florida amendment that would essentially get rid of the state's 6-week ban on abortion.
I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks.
Less than 24 hours later, he clarified his position, saying the amendment that would legalize abortion through the 9th month is a no-go.
All of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
Marjorie Dannenfelser with the SBA list acknowledges the messaging has been confusing to the pro-life voters that they are trying to get to the polls.
The threat would be that people stay home because they can't sort out what's the better choice. So it's our job to say, yes, I see where you're coming from, but it's still the better choice to go with the candidates that will preserve states' rights to pass pro-life laws. To be perfectly honest, I'm going door to door to do everything I can to keep Harris out of office.
He's not Kamala Harris. He's not advocating for abortion until birth at taxpayer expense. So we have to choose that which is least offensive or that which more clearly aligns with biblical truth.
But the jury is still out if that's going to translate into the same enthusiasm.
I do think what is going to happen is that you're going to have a lack of enthusiasm, which means people aren't going to vote for the other side. I mean, I always hear this question. You've heard it, David. Where are your people going to go? Well, the issue is they're not going to go anywhere. Some of them are going to stay home, and that's the last thing we need.
There is a plan in place, with the Faith and Freedom Coalition busier than ever on the ground.
We're knocking on 10 million doors. We're making 10 million get out the vote calls. We're sending 28 million get out the vote texts.
CEO Ralph Reed believes born-again, Bible-believing evangelical voter turnout will be bigger than in 2016 or 2020. While abortion has been tricky, supporters maintain Trump still advocates for conservative pro-family policies. Also, this time around, new federal election rules allow the Trump campaign to work with outside groups like Faith and Freedom to mobilize voters. Reed has a warning to conservative Christian voters who stay home.
And I will tell you this. Donald Trump sometimes says and does things that I wish he wouldn't say or do. But he is the most pro-life advocate we've ever had sitting behind the Resolute desk, sitting in the Oval Office. He delivered for us. This is about the sanctity of life. If they stay home, then they don't deserve to have this victory. They don't deserve to have leaders like that.
As for the campaign, it recently launched its Believers for Trump coalition.
The evangelical community is a massive part of our campaign, and we need them to win on November the 5th. And our campaign understands that. President Trump understands that.
The campaign says this group has signed up more than 2,000 church captains to educate fellow evangelicals on getting out to vote and the choice before them.
We're also targeting low propensity evangelical voters who may not be political, may not have voted in past election cycles, but we have teams on the ground across the battleground state that are focused on doing just that.
Also this week, the campaign announced a new Catholics for Trump coalition. Trump world fully aware an all-hands-on-deck approach is needed as the country heads toward the fall election. The question will be whether evangelicals stick with Trump to once again be his saving grace. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
The anti-free speech movement. We're going to examine the sharp rise of censorship in democracies around the world. Stay with us. Welcome back to CBN News Watch. A global fight over freedom of speech is underway. More countries are passing laws to regulate so-called hate speech and disinformation online. In America, free speech advocates argue that's part of what the First Amendment was designed to protect. Del Hurd joins us again now with the story.
A censorship movement is rising in the world's democracies, whether it's British citizens charged over their social media posts, France's arrest of the owner of the social media platform Telegram, Brazil's shutting down X after Elon Musk refused to comply with censorship restrictions, or Mark Zuckerberg's admission that the Biden White House pressured Facebook and Instagram to censor stories it didn't like.
This anti-free speech movement is the most sophisticated, largest, and global movement we have ever faced.
Legal scholar Jonathan Turley is the author of The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage.
I think that the problem with free speech is that every generation has to defend it. And this generation has never been more divided because they have been told that free speech is going to hurt them.
A poll this year found nearly 1 in 3 Americans now believe the First Amendment goes too far.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
The freedom to say what the majority doesn't like is the very foundation of a free society. And yet that bedrock freedom is increasingly being tossed aside. An investigation by the Foundation for Freedom Online found documents from Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, that seemed to indicate as recently as last year that the agency worked with platforms to censor speech by labeling people posting so-called misinformation as domestic threat actors. The website was then scrubbed from the internet but was found using the Wayback Machine. A CISA spokesman said the agency has never censored anyone and that the material was probably removed because it created a misunderstanding. But CISA is a part of Homeland Security, which tried to create a disinformation czar. Documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act from USAID, a State Department program intended to strengthen democracies overseas, show that the agency encourages other nations to censor social media. In other Western democracies, the censorship situation is even worse. In Great Britain, a nation most Americans used to consider a bastion of democracy, police charge thousands of citizens each year over their social media posts.
Arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network.
A British official also threatened to extradite Americans who stir up trouble in the UK through online posts. The European Union no longer has free speech online, according to technology expert Dr. Norman Lewis with the think tank MCC Brussels. Lewis says only speech approved by the EU government is allowed.
What we have operating in Europe is what I call it's a censorship operating system.
Laws like the EU's Digital Services Act force technology companies to remove content Brussels doesn't like.
They want to control the public square. And so, formally speaking, there's free speech. But when you have such vague definitions as hate speech or any of these new, woke ideologies, is all about controlling speech. So you can formally uphold free speech, but in reality, it means that you curb stuff that you don't like.
One EU official threatened Elon Musk over his interview with Donald Trump.
There really is what I call an EU Ministry of Truth. George Orwell would recognize this within a millisecond.
America's First Amendment was written to prevent this kind of censorship. By defending speech the majority finds offensive, insulting, and even verbally abusive. The Supreme Court has said the First Amendment protects the freedom to express the thought that we hate.
Free speech is a natural right. That was how the framers viewed it when they wrote the First Amendment. They believed that free speech was a gift from God, that it belonged to you as a human being. It wasn't granted to you by the government. It's not tolerated by the government. The government has to protect it because it defines you as a human being.
Some say one reason for the recent riots in Britain is that citizens were not allowed to publicly express their frustrations about mass migration without being arrested. Ken Paulson, the former editor-in-chief of USA Today and director of the Free Speech Center at Middle Tennessee State University, says the First Amendment freedom of speech is vital to America's existence.
I believe that we need an environment in which all ideas can be shared, regardless of merit. And unless you are able to speak as you wish, then there is no way we remain rich and strong as a nation.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Time for your Monday Motivation, and today I leave you with this reminder. You are pregnant with purpose and possibility. You are in labor and it may be painful, but now is not the time to quit. It's time to push through the pain, keep breathing, and push some more. There is life on the inside of you, and it's time to deliver. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online. That's cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us. That address is newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a marvelous Monday, everybody.